Hey there, editing me coming in, headphone users beware. The audio does get a little poppy and crunchy, and I really didn't want to have to go back and re-record it, so just a heads up. Hey, so I kicked off talking about Monster High comics about a year ago with the 2024 Monster High Pride issue. I thought it would be fun, even though I've dropped the ongoing series, to check out this year's Pride issue. I had some time this morning to record, so this is just kind of my loose thoughts and feelings as I flip through the comic. It would have taken longer for me to write a script, and I feel like the comic came out almost a week ago, so I want to get this done. Alright, let's get into it. So in the same vein as last year, the comic is actually split into 2 issues in one special, and it actually doesn't contain a mini comic. Last year's had sort of a side plot that took up Clawdeen and Toralei's story, so that may or may not be a positive to you. I think of it as a positive. I didn't really like that inclusion last year, but yeah, I talked about it more last year. You can go check out that video if you want more specifics on what I'm talking about. But yeah, you don't get that in this. It really focuses more on just Clawdeen and Toralei. The 2 comics are Math Camp, which follows Clawdeen and Toralei, Clawdeen Wolf and Toralei Stripes, and Beyond a Shadow of a Doubt, which follows Kieran and Valentine and Spelldon Cauldron, so the same couples, the same duos as last year's issue. In fact, Toralei and Clawdeen's story is like the origin story of their relationship, whereas Spelldon and Valentine's kind of picks up directly from last year's. I would honestly put it closer to the Halloween issue maybe, but yeah, more on that later. Anyways, I'm gonna kick off first by talking about Math Camp and then talking about Beyond a Shadow of a Doubt. In Math Camp, we see Toralei return to a math camp that she attended previously. We see this in the diary entry for her doll, that she's gone here before as like a punishment or a retribution for a prank that she pulled at Monster High. And while at camp the previous summer, or whenever it happened, I personally don't think too much about the timeline of Monster High. Toralei does befriend a troll named Tila. On their way home from camp, Tila reveals that her boyfriend had broken up with her right before camp started because he was hoping to find someone his intellectual equal. So he was calling her dumb, and Toralei pulls a prank on him in order to get him to apologize to Tila. And although I would like to assume they don't get back together, we do see Toralei check in with Tila at the beginning of this issue. I do think that's really nice and a pretty strong opening for me, in my opinion, of Toralei. It's just good to see her with friends that aren't Persephone and Meowdy, and kind of give her character a bit more rounding, as we can see that she's not always the like mean girl that she's portrayed as at Monster High proper. We then see that Clawdeen is actually attending the same math camp. She's here to try to study and get a better idea of finances, since someday she would like to open her own business or boutique or fashion brand, and needs math skills in order to accomplish that.
I am one fierce fashionista. Think of me as a wolf in chic clothing.
I like that message. I think it's cute. It's definitely a good reason for her to be there. Through the comic, we see that Toralei and Clawdeen are actually roommates at the camp.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
And because they're roommates, they are going to be competing together at the math contest that the camp holds throughout its week, or however long the camp goes on for. We also get a good look at how the girls structure their math skills, with Toralei having a much more analytical, numerical system, as opposed to Clawdeen seeing math in yards and patterns, which is very cool. I like the different expressions of how they utilize the same skills, and it's nice that they were able to implement that aspect of Clawdeen's character into this story. As much as Toralei and Clawdeen butt heads throughout the comic, the true antagonists are this set of twins, more on that later, who literally wear their names on their shirts and antagonize and kind of pick on specifically Clawdeen, and to a lesser extent Toralei, throughout the entire issue, with the girls eventually coming together with a common enemy in order to try to defeat them for the competition. The story culminates with the girls, the twins, and a set of background characters as the finalists for the contest. We do get a few moments before that I think are sweet or done pretty well, including a conversation between Tila and Toralei about Toralei's potential feelings for Clawdeen. It's very cute. Eventually, though, we do see the ghouls come in second at the contest, with the unnamed background characters coming in first. Toralei and Clawdeen don't win, but they do get to see their enemies lose, which I suppose to some people is just as sweet. And the last page of the comic is Toralei confessing her feelings and a kiss between the ghouls, which is funny because Clawdeen says, let's take things slow. You can call me old-fashioned, but I kind of thought that was a bit odd. Personally, I would have liked maybe one more issue before we get the establishment of their relationship or a kiss between the ghouls. It is what it is. It's functionally fine, and I think a lot of people will like it more than me. I did like the heavier emphasis on giving Toralei a more rounded personality and establishing that although they are very different people, her and Clawdeen do have similar interests in math and their ability to loyally defend people they care about, even if what they care about is the ability to tease said individual. It definitely gives no one can be mean to them but me, which for some people I think they really enjoy. I feel very neutral about that, but yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of pining kind of from both the ghouls in this, mostly Toralei though. And we also see a flashback from that episode where it's the story of Toralei's stripes or whatever, where she's sitting next to a box. Toralei's background really confuses me because her diary doesn't go into any depth about the background of her character, besides her having Sweet Fang, which is her saber-toothed cat, and then also she references her parents. So I'm a little confused as to what her background as a character is, and how much of the webisode is accurate, because I think that was a Spectra episode, so you can't really believe everything that she's saying. And then, so I don't know. If you know Toralei's background definitively, let me know. Anyway, I'm sorry, I keep going on tangents. I should have written a script, but whatever. As far as the first story goes, I thought it was fine. I honestly thought it was a stronger Toralei and Clawdeen story than last year, just because our entire emphasis was on Toralei and Clawdeen. We got to see them a lot more. Well, not necessarily more, because they were the main characters of last year's issue, but there was a much heavier focus on their background and their communication and everything that they had going on directly, as opposed to last year. At least what I remember from last year. I could be wrong. I still don't really like the vibe of their relationship, just because, and this sounds silly because I did say that there was more focus on it. The build-up and execution were very odd. I personally would have really liked if they established feelings for each other in this, and then it didn't end with a kiss, just because it feels very rushed. I would have liked just maybe a hair more material, maybe one more issue before we get their first kiss. It was just I don't know, it felt a little rushed. But other than that, I thought the comic was very sweet for their relationship and the way their characters are written. I did really enjoy them bringing back the math camp element for Toralei and giving them a reason for Clawdeen to be there. I think if it hadn't been math camp, another good choice might have been art camp, something like that, where this is just me pitching a comic, I guess. Sorry, this sounds really weird, but I could see them doing a similar thing with them at art camp, where Clawdeen is there for fashion and Toralei is there for either acting or singing, since we've seen her merciless in her love of performing. So if they wanted to do another camp issue, I could see them doing a Clawdeen needs to design Toralei's outfit for the talent show, and so they have to kind of butt heads and work together to figure out what the performance is going to look like, and maybe they have different choices of fashion and self-expression, and so they need to kind of learn to work together to create the best performance possible. And maybe Clawdeen needs to encourage Toralei to have her own sound, since Toralei uses her imitation ability quite often and has even stolen Caddy Noir's voice before in the Boo York movie. So maybe she feels like she needs to impersonate people or pretend to be someone else in order to have recognition and have a presence on stage, whereas Clawdeen can convince her to kind of stand on her own, or at least feel comfortable enough in what Clawdeen has created for her to kind of express how she feels as an individual. Anyway, that's literally just me pitching a comic. Mattel, hire me. I'm joking. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything. My biggest gripe with this comic, and this is an entirely personal take, and it may not have to do with your reading or interpretation of the comic. I don't really like the twins in this. This is gonna sound really goofy and maybe like too much information for me to put on the internet, but I'm a triplet, so I tend to be kind of picky about twins in media, and there's a lot of them that I do really like, but I feel like whenever it's just their whole gimmick or their whole shtick is being twins and they're like weirdly connected at the hip, I tend not to like those specific characters when the only thing they have going on is the fact that they are just twins and that's it. And Monster High already kind of does that with Persephone and Meowlity, so I don't know. So that's my biggest gripe with the issue. It definitely won't be most people's, but I have a serious disdain for it. So part 2, or the second comic of this issue, follows Kieran and Valentine and Spelldon Cauldron. It kind of picks up from last year. It's implied that some time has passed, but I wouldn't say it's a year in canon. I would say at most maybe a couple weeks. We know that Valentine still hasn't introduced Spelldon to his best friend Wisp. Anyway, regardless, this issue basically consists of Spelldon telling Valentine that he loves him, and then Valentine reacting, I feel like appropriately, and kind of freaking out and worrying that he has begun feeding off of Spelldon's love and affection for him. Valentine is an energy vampire, so he draws his power or his abilities from people's affection for him. We saw this in Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love, and also to a lesser extent in last year's issue with him expressing worry over it, and even getting Spelldon kind of making fun of him, the way that he kind of puts on a persona to gain people's trust, affection, admiration. I would like to point out I don't think he's doing the southern accent anymore, which is a fun character development for him. The cadence and the way that he speaks in this never implies that he's doing a voice or a bit, so good for him, and good on Spelldon for convincing him to drop it. It's really silly once you notice it. But we see that Valentine is kind of plagued and blighted by these little chibi illustrations, these hearts and stars and kind of cupids of Spelldon that follow him around. I guess my interpretation of it is that there's some sort of illusion or, I don't know, light power. They certainly seem to be real elements in the comic, with him sort of conjuring these little figures up as a side effect of perhaps over-generating magic. I'm not really sure. It does remind me of the clouds that follow him around in the original Monster High Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love movie, which does make me wonder if maybe those were a negative representation of his power and using it in more of a villainous way, if that makes sense. But we don't learn too much about that. In fact, we don't really learn anything about it besides it just being established as an ability that he can do, which is fine. I'm not here to dissect or overanalyze the magic and abilities of the monsters of Monster High. I'm sure there's someone smarter than me that can do that and more familiar with the franchise. Anyway, I'm talking too much. I'm so sorry. Valentine confesses to Wisp that his powers are acting up and he's worried that he is accidentally feeding off of the affection from Spelldon. And she basically says, well, I haven't even gotten to meet him, so bring him to the fairground so she can meet him at least, and then she can try to help him out. Obviously, he brings Spelldon to the fairground. And we do see him kind of comedically trying to hide the little hearts and stars and whatever from Spelldon as they make their way through the grounds. Pretty quickly after they arrive, they do get a text call or a video call from Wisp, basically saying to get away. The fairgrounds have been abandoned because a shadow creature is feeding off of spellcasters, which is not great because Spelldon is a witch, as opposed to the new generation Monster High. Witches were a species in Monster High before, with them having intrinsic magical abilities and can cast spells and all that, as opposed to Gen 3 Monster High, where it's anyone can be a spellcaster, I believe. But I like it better when they're their own thing. Not that Dracula using magic isn't cool.
I'm a witch. I'm a witch!
Anyways, pretty much as soon as she sends that, they are confronted by the shadow creature. It tries to kidnap Spelldon. Valentine defends them with his little hearts and stars. Hearts and stars, which is very cute. And we see Spelldon kind of realize what's going on, tries throughout the comic to, again, kind of similar to last year's issue, get Valentine to relax a little bit. Valentine and Spelldon do end up having a really nice conversation about Valentine's concerns with with Spelldon reassuring him how much he sincerely does care about him. All the while, they're still running from the shadow creature and trying to turn the lights on at the fair with their magic. Valentine finally realizes that it's not Spelldon's affection he's feeding on, but his own. Him having love for Spelldon, he's able to kind of create a cycle of romantic vibe for himself, which is kind of like it feels like that meme where like if you plug an outlet into an outlet, it's like endless energy or whatever. Like it feels a little goofy, but it's a very cute sentiment. But anyway, the shadow creature is revealed to be a wisp, and she's very happy to meet Spelldon, and the comic ends with another kiss just to seal the deal, finish the story, and that's pretty much it. Oh, it's also revealed that the fair being empty was an illusion, so I don't know if I like to think that they were running around with this whole thing happening and everyone else could just see what was happening, but I don't know if that's the case or not. But yeah, that's pretty much the second story. I liked this one fine. I do like that they revisit the fairgrounds from the Halloween special. I think that's a fun way to call back to previous issues, and also it just seems like a fun location. This might give a better idea of when the story takes place. Like this could be happening around Halloween, but also Monster High is kind of weird and funny, so if Wisp is just owning and operating a fairground next to Monster High, more power to you. I guess. But yeah, the story itself is cute. I feel like both stories this year were kind of on par with each other, if I'm being honest. There isn't really one over the other. I will say, and this is a hot take, I don't think we needed another Valentine and Spelldon story. I think that last year's issue was really nice, and I would have maybe liked to see a different couple or a different situation this year, just because I feel like they had a really nice one shot, and this is a fun platform to express different stories and stuff, so I don't know. It would have been cool to see maybe the inclusivity club at Monster High and what that's set up like and how that works in a world full of monsters, or maybe some like older characters coming in to express what it was like to grow up gay in the Monster High world, or I don't know. But yeah, I feel like there's so many different characters or stories that they could tell that although I do really like this, I think Spelldon and Valentine's story was wrapped up so well, stood strongly on its own, that it didn't need this continuation in this year's book. I maybe would have liked to see a different story be told. And I'm sorry to anyone that likes Valentine and Spelldon, I like them too, but yeah. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm being very rude. I liked this issue. Some of the other highlights for me were the art. The art has always been very strong and very consistent in the Monster High books, which I think is great, especially because this feels like a franchise that really deserves that kind of extra time spent on character designs and colors and things, because the dolls and the franchise itself is so unique looking. Spelldon and Valentine's story definitely leans more heavily into that like anime style, whereas Clawdeen and Toralei's looks more focused on maintaining that specific look for Monster High. And also I liked that both stories this year again were structured around the characters that they're meant to focus on, as opposed to drifting away to other concepts, ideas, or storylines. I think that was last year's, at least again for Clawdeen and Toralei's story, last year's biggest fault for me. I also thought the writing was pretty good in each of them. It's definitely written for a younger audience, but it didn't feel like it was pandering to a young crowd. It's still quite a bit to read. It's not like they tried to simplify the language or impede anyone from telling anything through text, and it pairs well with how animated a lot of the art is. I feel like I'm gonna have to really edit this video. I got into a habit of writing scripts because when I don't, I tend to talk forever about nothing. So I apologize if you've watched this with the intent of a very analytical take of the comic. Unfortunately, I'm just kind of going with vibes right now. Yeah, thank you for, if you're still watching this, thank you for watching it this far and listening to me drone on. If you've been reading the Monster High ongoing series, I do know that their second story for it is starting soon, like their second arc for it is starting soon. Do you think it's worth going back and rereading the new Scaremester volume now that the volume is out? I've kind of been debating it. Do you wonder how much of it was the pacing of the story, and if I could read it all in one go, I wonder if it'd be better. But I'm just not sure if it will maintain or interest me. But yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling, and sorry this video took so long. Just a million things are happening in my life, but I also have been working on that video about Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde because I do want to get more into talking about movies, but I don't like the way I sound in it. I'm not a perfectionist, but I don't like when I sound like I'm being particularly harsh or rude on things. And I also, because I like to try to be positive on this channel, I don't want to be one of those YouTubers that just get online to berate things. I don't think that that's a vibe that I would like to associate with myself. I'm pretty negative in real life, so being negative on the internet doesn't seem worth it. Yeah, anyway, I've lost the plot for what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna end the video, but thank you so much for watching, and if you're still here and you don't mind the format and how I talk, please check out my channel, I guess. And yeah, let me know what your thoughts and feelings are if you've read the comic or if you're gonna check it out. Hopefully I didn't spoil it to the point where you feel like you don't need to buy it. So yeah, anyway, have a good night. I might have redrawn my avatar. I feel like I've been wanting to redraw my avatar lately because it's been a while and I'm so easily bored and distracted. So it might look different. If it doesn't, I'll probably cut this out. Have a good night or day wherever you are, and hopefully I'll have something new for you soon. Bye, YouTube.